Can you hear me?
I can, yes. I'm in my vehicle heading back to my home office from a client meeting. So
Okay.
apologize that I'm in the truck, but I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. As long as you don't crash.
No, I'm an experienced driver.
Okay, good. Good. So you're in the sales industry, correct?
I am. I do. There's three legs to my stool. And I'm actually in the process of updating my LinkedIn page. So this will be reflected in that update, which will occur in the next couple of weeks. So I'm a fractional VP of sales. I do some client strategy work, and I'm a certified exit planner. So I help companies, small businesses, prep for sale. In all cases, and what I would tell you my value proposition is I help small business owners grow equity and profitability by helping them improve the systems and organizations in their customer, human, structural, and social capital of their business.
Okay. Is there a particular industry you specialize in, or does that matter?
No, but I tend to focus. By the way, I should ask, do I call you Leo?
Yes.
Okay. Leo, I tend to focus on what I would describe as second stage entrepreneurs. So what that typically means to me is, 10 to 99 employees. It can be more. And, revenues in the $5 to $75 million range that have some complexity in their business model, and they are B2B versus B2C. Now, as I've said that, one of my main clients right now is B2C. So, but I'm absolutely an advocate of in order to broaden your appeal, you first have to narrow your focus, which is why I use the second stage entrepreneur as a caveat. But there isn't really any specificity in industries. My client list over the past year or two has been e-commerce, manufacturing, engineering services, which is the client I just left, IT services, and then professional services like me, consultants, what have you.
Okay. I would say most of my clients are in the construction space. Is that a
fun?
Did you say fun?
Funny. No, I just my engineering services client. I'm just part of the strategy work that I'm doing with them right now. I'm working on a competitive analysis. They're in the helical and micropile business.
Oh, really?
And
okay.
so they build deep foundations for buildings that are going to go up, and specifically in difficult soil situations and tight access situations. Okay. So I'm quite familiar with the construction industry, quite familiar.
Okay. And this is a larger company. Is this still in the 75 million range?
Yeah, they're 25 million.
Okay.
In revenue, and 54 employees.
54. Okay.
And for me, that's like my sweet spot.
Okay. And what's your background? How did you get into this space?
Great question. I want to tell you the Reader's Digest version because I don't want to bore you with too many details, but I want to give you enough. So so first of all, my parents had a family business, a printing company.
Okay.
And I went to high school and university in Regina. My dad is from Saskatchewan. My mom's from Hamilton. They met here in Ontario. My brother and I were born in Mississauga. When I was 11, we as a family moved to Regina. That's where I went to high school and university. About a year after graduating, I was working for Minolta in Calgary, and my parents bought this business. And asked my brother and I to lend a hand. So that's how I came back to Ontario. And that's how I got into broadly the document management space. I spent just a little over 2 decades with one organization called Data Communications Management. I left in 2017 as the SVP of Sales, $350 million publicly traded company. And I was accountable for the revenue line on the P&L, $30 million operating budget, 225 people. So from a leadership perspective, I've got, and obviously I didn't start in that role. You know, I evolved into that role. So a lot of iterations along the way to that role. The reason I left the corporate world is I live in Kitchener, and that company is headquartered on the border of Brampton and Mississauga. So an hour and 15-minute commute each way every day for 10 years. And if I wasn't commuting, I was on an airplane. And after a while, and I'm curious to learn about your background, and there may be some similarities here, but that just became a cross I wasn't prepared to bear anymore. Mm-hmm. So I negotiated my exit in early 2017. There was actually an event that happened, my youngest son asking for more of my time. And there was, if we get to know each other, I'll tell you the story. But so I left in the spring of 2017. I took the summer off. I like to golf, but I never get to play. And so I decided I was going to play some golf and do a couple of renovations around the house. In October of that same year, my plan when I left was to buy a business or take on a role, senior sales leadership role in a tech company I'm in Kitchener-Waterloo, so with an equity stake. In October of that year, I had a seizure. So I came to in the emergency room, and 2 things happened. One, they said your prognosis is unknown, and we need your driver's license for the next 6 months. Those 2 things made me reassess my risk profile. In the meantime, Sales Acceleration, which is an organization in the United States that I license content from, was actively pursuing me. And so I changed gears and decided to become a consultant. And I opened my practice, Leo, in the start of 2019. Had some success early on, and that was great. And then the pandemic hit, caused me to pivot. I built a coaching program for other consultants like me who were selling high value services, but may not be in the sales field. So selling high value services may not be as, it might be more cumbersome for them than it was for myself. And that's what sustained me. In the fall of 2020, I was very fortunate. I landed more fractional clients as we began to open up and restrictions began to ease. And one of those clients, fairly substantial sized organization, asked me if I could help build their strategy. And I said, well, I haven't done that before. I've participated in those kinds of events in the corporate world, but leave it with me. Let me come back to you. And so I took a course and I read a book, and I went back to them and said, this would be the first time I would be facilitating this, but I'd be happy to give it a try. And the result was successful. And so that's why I say that became the second leg of my stool. While that was happening, 2 of my 3 clients asked me to sell our businesses, but how we don't know where to start.
Sorry, you cut out there for a second. To sell their businesses?
Help. Right, so they asked me for some help, and not myself knowing what the right way to help was. And I went on LinkedIn and I talked to people, and what I ultimately decided to do was I took a course through the Exit Planning Institute in the United States, and I achieved a certification called the Certified Exit Planning Advisor, and that became the 3rd leg of my stool. So that both gives you the background, but also how did I end up with these 3 legs of my stool? Sorry for talking so long.
No, that's fine. Okay. The initial thought, so you understand why I asked for this conversation. The initial thought was to do a webinar together and see if there's enough synergy there, and whether we're potentially sharing the same type of client and whether it would make sense to do some type of webinar together. That was the initial thought.
Okay.
Okay. So to give you a little background, 100% of my new clients come from LinkedIn, generally from referrals, because no one wants to talk to a consultant. So it's usually someone says, you know, you have to talk to Leo about that. And Leo can probably help you with that. But no one ever in 40 years, no one has ever approached me directly without someone saying, hey, you need to talk to Leo about that. And a lot of times it's the wife or sometimes the daughter or the son that says, hey, you need to talk to somebody about that. So I started my first construction business when I was 17 years old, developed it to 22 different franchises. And ultimately we started, we sold hundreds of franchises. And franchising is basically taking someone who knows nothing about the construction space and teaching them the systems and everything they need to know in order to be successful in the construction space. And that's basically what we do is we've helped in our 40-year career, we've helped over 1,000 companies go from under 2 million in revenue. Today, they're doing 5, 10, and 20 million, and 2 companies into $100 million space. So that's basically what we do. We bring in systems, we bring in procedures, we have interim CEO programs, we help them hire executives, we help them hire blue collar people, we help them in whatever issues they're having, or the most pressing issue, which tends to be a lot of, we can't find people. So that's generally the start of a lot of different projects. And we have 30 subcontractors that do what we can't do well.
Okay.
I hope you got all that because I think our connection is not all that great.
Right. I'm almost home, so I'll be on my home PC in a matter of a couple minutes, but I did hear everything.
Okay, great. So do you have staff or are you doing this all on your own?
Yes, I am a one-man band.
Okay. Okay. Can you handle more clients at this point? Does a webinar make sense? Because if you can't handle more clients, there's no point in discussing that.
Yeah, the answer is yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And I like webinars, and it's why I responded so quickly to your ask or offer, because there's, as you say, the only thing that is better than a referral or as good as a referral is a client being able to try you on in action, which I think a webinar enables. And so it's one of the ways I like to sell.
Okay.
And Leo, I'm at my home office now, so I'm gonna just set my phone down so that I can try and join via my computer. Might lose you on my phone, but I'll join through my PC.
Sounds good.
All right, I'm going to hang up here, and I should be appearing.
Yep, you are. I've just let you in.
Okay. There you are. There I am.
Okay, so if it sounds interesting, if that's something we would like to try a webinar together, I guess the next step would be, what topics would we want to talk about? And I guess topics would have a lot to do with our intended audience and who we invite. So any ideas there? I mean, we can always talk about strategies on how to find clients on LinkedIn. I mean, that's a standard, that's a go-to, that's what everybody else tends to use, and it works. But that tends to draw in the more of the entrepreneur crowd, the crowd that's trying to break 1 million. And I'm not sure that that's the right type of clientele for you. I can work with those clients, but obviously I would prefer to have someone who's in the 3 to 10 million range as the starting point. But I would certainly not push anyone like that away if they're open-minded and willing to change.
Sure. I can be flexible, and so I'm gonna come around to answering your question by explaining how I view. I'll call it my inventory. So I can sell. I could sell time by the hour or what have you, but I typically do half days. So I view my inventory as 10 units in a week. Right now I'm 3 units sold. So I have 7 available, if you will. So that gives you a sense of, and, if it's a smaller client in that, sort of, let's say 1 to 5 million range, all they're going to want is 1 unit. So half a day. If it's a larger client, the client that I mentioned that asked me to do the strategy, headquartered in Calgary, when I met them, they were 400 million in revenue. The year that just finished, they did 650. And I'd like to tell you, Leo, that it was all a direct result of working with me. And while I think some of it was, it's also a whole lot of market dynamic. So in their case, they took 2 days or 4 units of inventory. So, and I have, like you, some subcontractors that can expand my inventory if required. So 3 million to 15 million, easy for me to take on someone like that. But let's think about two things, because if we're going to do a webinar, what we should maybe try and determine is, do we want to have an offering that is a combined offering, or it's 2 practitioners coming together to deliver value for an audience, and then the audience sort of decides who is doing what that they need to avail themselves of. So I guess if you think about it, the way I think about exit planning as a, for instance, or preparing for a liquidity event, preparing for a sale, is, and I mentioned working on human capital and structural capital and customer capital and social capital. Well, customer capital is, how do you acquire clients? Do you have a customer concentration issue? Do you have the right strategy, methodology, coverage? Are you doing the right analysis? Human capital, it sounds like, is an area where you get involved. So do you have the right team, or have you got gaps? Do you know, are you getting the right performance from your team? Do you know how to manage your team? Do you have any kind of systems in place, which might be an area that you get involved in? Structural capital is the systems and routines, as you've alluded to. Are they written down? Because they can't be improved until first they're defined and written down. So, again, that's an area where you may be able to add some value. Social capital, that's your culture, which gets improved as an outcome of doing well in those first three areas. So let's say, just winging it as a for instance, let's say that the topic was, how do you triple your business value in 1 to 5 years, or 2 to 3 years, or 3 to 4 years? Let's say that was the topic.
Okay.
And then we could talk about anything we wanted in that broad category that I just described. We could talk about performance management. We could talk about, there's two main systems in every business: the economic system and the organizational system, or the social system, if you will. The economic system is how you go to market, your value proposition, how you create value for clients, the problems you uniquely solve, how you make money. And then the social system is the system around which you manage your people in the effort of accomplishing the first system. And so we could simply talk around those topics. And what might be interesting, and again, you tell me if it's interesting to you, is to think about, instead of hiring one or the other of us, hire us both. And maybe it's monthly retainer plus, and I'm just throwing out ideas now. Maybe it's monthly retainer. And for that, you get to engage with us. I shouldn't use those words, but I'm trying to be expeditious in explaining this. Mm-hmm. Get to engage with us sounds arrogant. I don't want to come across that way, but you get to engage with us, let's say 2 hours a week. But in addition to that, there are other services that they could avail themselves of, whether it's recruiting, sales plan, strategy, what have you, that could be in addition to the monthly retainer, just spitballing.
Okay. I would be okay with everything you've suggested so far, whether it's a package deal that we split in half, or
that would be the simplest thing.
Yes.
And then it's just straightforward. And then, you just try to find a way to equitably divide up the work.
Right. And there's always upsell. Yeah. I imagine you would be having conversations with these potential clients. You would be upselling to your program exclusively. And I would be doing the same on my side once they signed up for the original basic program.
Could very well be. Or we just do whatever my unique stuff is, we split that too. And we find a way to I'm making this up, so it's clunky right now, but we find a way to co-facilitate. Like if we're building a sales plan, you may or may not be able to participate in that. I don't know you well enough, but then again, you might be able to too. And I have a framework. I'm not afraid to share it. If we were doing a strategy, you can take, and by the way, if you're going to work with a client and try to increase their value, step one is to make sure we clearly understand current state and there's a strategy to get to desired state. So you almost always have to do the strategy piece. But that's a 2-day offsite. There's a few days to prepare and a few days of work after the fact. And a lot of that can be co-shared. Okay.
It sounds like you've worked for one of the big 3 management consulting firms.
I have not.
Oh, okay.
I've just been thinking about this stuff quite a bit in the last while. Since I took the exit planning certification, what I came away from that program learning was, of course, the sort of the tactical, how do you increase the value, but also it takes a village. It's not the kind of thing you can do by yourself. So I've been thinking about, how do I partner with people? Sure, I want to get paid, but just as much, I want to build my own social proof. I want to be the guy that's sort of thought of as being really, really good at this in Southern Ontario. That's what I'm after. Because then all the other things sort of take care of themselves. And so I've been thinking about it a lot.
Okay. the way we function, and I was trained by the largest management consulting firm and how we function, and their process hadn't changed for 85 years. We basically do a 3-day forensic analysis of the business, see what they're doing well and what they're doing that could be improved upon. Then we make suggestions. Do you want help improving some of these programs, or do you want to do it on your own? It's your choice. So the onboarding process, we try and make as painless as possible by doing small projects to prove ourselves. Then they become hooked on success. Then we build and build and build and build on that success. And hopefully we work with them for years to come. We're not it's too expensive to build a short-term relationship and just work with them, for a couple of days here and there and say, good luck and,
sure,
we'll see you on the next life. So we always try to have other steps on the ladder where they can ask for help.
Yeah, I think, so I'll share some statistics. I hear your approach. And so let me share a couple of things to sort of get you thinking. 2/3 of the small business owners in North America, the stats aren't broken out, Canada and the US, so I can't tell you the number in Canada. If it's exactly the same, obviously this will be overweighted by the US numbers, but 2/3 of the small businesses in Canada, or pardon me, in North America, are owned by boomers. Average age of a boomer today is 61. You can't beat father time. So a lot of businesses, 2/3, 50%, somewhere in between those two numbers, are going to go through some form of transition in the next 5 to 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So if that's true, then the next thing that's probably true, while there is a lot of money available to buy businesses, private equity, VC, et cetera, if there becomes a lot of things for sale, then the resources to acquire them become more scarce and they end up competing against themselves. And while I'm not looking to scaremonger people into working with us, I view this as something that a lot of small business owners believe they're sitting on an asset, and it is their single biggest asset.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it is very illiquid. Most of the time, the buyers are far more sophisticated than the sellers.
Mm-hmm.
And people aren't doing enough to get ready. And exit planning is simply good business strategy. So that's why I think the starting point, I agree with what you've said wholeheartedly. And I have what I call the OSSD, or the on-site sales discovery diagnostic, that I do to give the client a clear picture of current state and all the recommendations around how they get to where they want to get to. And I encourage them to self-implement if that's what they want to do. But in the case of value creation, I think the starting point is, it's assessments, but they are very specific. Think about if you owned a variety store and 90% of your wealth is tied up in that store.
Mm-hmm.
You may or may not have, sort of your retirement figured out. Probably not, because most of the time the business being sold is what's going to fund the retirement. Most of the time there isn't a plan for what retirement's going to be. And most of the time, the owner doesn't actually know what the business is worth. They have anecdotal evidence. So there is looseness around all of the key things that they need to get right in order to figure out what the plan is. Mm-hmm. So at the start of the process, what I call that is the triggering event. And you're looking to find the wealth gap, the personal financial gap, the profit gap, and I'll come back to that, and then the value gap. The value gap is What is the business worth and what do you need it to be worth? Sometimes those will line up and that's great. Or the business will be worth more than the person, look at Warren Buffett. He doesn't need to sell anything. He doesn't want anything. He's not moving out of the house he has. But oftentimes people have some dreams. They've never been written down. They've never been asked to think them through. So the often that initial assessment, Leo, is figuring all that stuff out. And then you can actually do the building of the plan. If that makes any sense to you.
It does. It does. And if I was advising any client who was potentially looking to sell over the next 5 to 10 years, based on your numbers, and I believe those numbers are accurate, I would encourage them to sell sooner as opposed to later.
Well, maybe except if you think about, I'll try and create two different scenarios. Let's say that scenario A is a construction company that is a general contractor, and that general contractor has some key people, none of whom have any equity in the business. They treat them well. They've never told them that they could potentially be owners. They've never put anything in writing. They've agreed on a salary, and there's nothing more complicated than that. There's no bonus structure, and then you've got company B, who is also a general contractor. Let's say they're both doing 10 million in revenue, and they're both achieving the same profit number. In company B, 10% of the ownership is divided amongst the key leadership team. And every year there's a planning session where they say, this is what we think we're going to sell this year. This is what we think we're going to make. And if we hit these targets, this is what it means for you. And that's all written down. There's shareholder agreement, and it's all, if you're a private equity firm, you're going to pay a 3 times multiple for the first one and a 4 times multiple for the second one. Mm-hmm. And it might take a year of financial engineering to accomplish that task for company A to get to that 4 times multiple. And if they're making $2 million a year, 2 million times 3 is 6 million. 2 times 4 is 8 million. That's $2 million. Is that worth doing in a year? So I think the answer to your question or statement there is maybe. You could be right, but sometimes those gaps need to be closed in order for that business to realize its full value potential. Or the owner, we go through that triggering event, and the owner says, if I could get 8 million for this business, that's all I need to fuel the rest of my life. So that gap in value defines the timing.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. But it's all about having a conversation and discussing possibilities.
Sure.
Without starting that conversation, that client will never know what the value of his business is.
Or what it could be.
Or what it could be, exactly. So is that a topic? Would that topic bring people to the table or to the webinar?
Well, I don't know, because I've never done one on this particular topic. I've done webinars more on the sales side, and I'm pretty comfortable, attracting people to a conversation around that. Building a sales organization for superior results, creating a winning sales strategy, those kinds of topics. So this one would be somewhat new. And sometimes the draw is the speakers or the hosts. So, exit planning may not be the right thing for you and I to do the first time together, because, it may not be a topic that, the audience would resonate on with you. But that doesn't mean that it couldn't be in version 2. So maybe there's a version 1.
A more popular version. But I would be okay with having 2 or 3 people or 10 people on the webinar.
So would I.
If one of those or 2 of those people became clients, that's certainly worth the effort, especially if it's an exit type strategy, because a lot of things have to be aligned in order to get to a conversation about an exit strategy. A lot of things have to be done.
Yeah, and so think about, a fee for financial planner. Not one that sells products, that makes commission off of selling products, but the individual that actually creates the plan. And there's lots of fee for financial planners. I use one myself, that they actually build the plan, and then you have the person, your financial planner, who gets the commission on the products. They execute the plan, but they don't pick what stocks and bonds and mutual funds you invest in. That's done by but that person could be on the webinar, maybe even an accountant who could talk about the tax implications of prepping for a sale, because there are things that you can do to minimize taxes by creating estates, et cetera, by sheltering assets. So, but again, how complicated do we want to make this?
Well, I agree that multiple personalities can bring in multiple different types of clients. And I do have a CPA that could talk on that subject. And we have done webinars before, and she could certainly fill that role. The other thing that I've been trying to do, and I've had no success with whatsoever, is that, but I still believe it could work. And I'm not suggesting we try this between you and I, because I think you're too much of a gentleman to do it. I believe that sex sells and controversy sells even more. And I certainly have a lot of haters on LinkedIn that we mix it up often, but I try to be as polite as possible, but still try to share ideas, especially controversial ideas. One example that I want to give you was 2 gentlemen that have a regular podcast on LinkedIn, and they talk about sales. And I tried to invite myself on that podcast, and I said, if you invite me, understand that I'm going to have an opposing view or having a different perspective from what you've been sharing. And as soon as they said that, or as soon as I said that, the conversation was over. Because the conversation up to that point, watching their podcast, was both of them agreeing with each other. Right? But that's not how the world is. There's always opposing views. There's always other statistics. There's always other experiences. There's always someone who has done it the hard way or done it another way, right? And I was just trying to add some fuel for thought engines to process. I was trying to create engagement, but I was shot down before we even had a chance to have a conversation on the subject. But I haven't given up on that I believe that like-minded people created like-minded results. So if you have a whole bunch of people in your company that believe in what you believe, where's the controversy? Where's the arguments? Where's the passion? Right? How do you know your ideas are correct if there's no arguments? You see where I'm coming from?
I do, yes. Of course, I don't know the podcast, so but
and I'm not suggesting that we do that. I'm only suggesting that as a possible idea in version 10.
Okay.
Okay, so I should say on one of my videos, I talk about one of the first things that I do when I'm getting a tour of the company is when I go into a boardroom, I'm looking for coffee stains or dent stains where somebody threw a coffee mug against the wall, because that's evidence that there's some passionate conversations going on in that room. Okay, so I do have some controversial ideas.
Okay.
And I can certainly keep them in check if we have a polite audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of business owners that have controversial ideas, and we're living in a time where there's already been a line drawn in society, those that are getting vaccinated and then those that aren't, as a for instance.
Right.
I'm only interested in improving people and businesses for the purpose of improving their profitability and their equity, and in the process getting paid for that. In other words, I may have all kinds of opinions, and if they're relevant relative to that value proposition, then I'll share them. And if they're not, they're probably not important.
Okay. So I think we both are saying the same thing. We like the idea of doing a webinar or a LinkedIn Live event. If we bring in the CPA, it might be a good idea to do a LinkedIn Live event or just a webinar. There's advantages and disadvantages. A webinar you can promote to a lot more people. A LinkedIn Live event tends to be a little harder to promote. And considering it's our first time doing something together, promotion and 30 days or 3-week promotion period might be a good idea. And considering we're getting into Christmas season, I'm wondering how you feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little late for 2021. I think whatever plans we put in place would have to be January of 2022.
Okay, fair enough.
And I don't have an opinion, LinkedIn Live versus webinar. I guess we'd have to figure out. Just one sec. I'm going to just turn on a light here.
Sure.
As I came in the dark and didn't have a chance to turn on the light. I could see my face was all. So I think we'd have to define the target market and problem we're going to solve first. So topic, and then from there decide on the best medium, if you will, to whether it's LinkedIn Live or webinar. And as you say, there's pros and cons. I don't even know what the pros and cons are. I mean, I'm more familiar with webinars.
Okay. Should we be talking about topic, singular or plural? Because if we talk about 3 different topics, now we have a bigger chance of one of them being a key button or a hot button for someone in the audience.
I think, there's a tendency to want to say, sort of cast a wide net, but I think in order to broaden our appeal, we actually have to narrow our focus. So, I think that 2022 is probably going to be a difficult year for a lot of small businesses. Subsidies have all ended. We've got global warming going on. There's a lot of bad news. While there's lots of industries and small businesses that will be just fine, there's lots that are going to face difficult times. So, how well prepared they are from a revenue perspective and a from a cash flow perspective to weather any ups and downs in the year will be topical and on people's minds. I like value creation because you get to talk about things that I think are really, really important to business owners. And that is, what's the value of my business and how do I increase that? The sales and value creation really play together quite well because sales pays twice. if you improve your revenue, your profit goes up and your multiple goes up at the same time if you're growing faster than your competitors. So those are areas I like. What webinars have you done in the past, Leo?
About getting clients from LinkedIn, about trusted circles, about culture, more generic stuff.
Okay.
But I like the idea of improving the value of your business. I think that's something that will resonate with a lot of business owners, and it's not a topic that is readily available on LinkedIn every day. So I think we could stand out a little bit more on that with the right marketing tools. I think that would be a good start.
Okay. Just so you know, I do have a 5 o'clock meeting, which is rare. I don't normally have 5 o'clock meetings, but I do today. And I'm going to have to visit the water closet before my 5 o'clock meeting because I came from a meeting in the car. And so.
Oh, I understand. I've pretty much said what I wanted to say.
Okay.
I think we can end this conversation here. We can both go back and start thinking about what should that look like, and even pick a date. So let's keep the communication going on LinkedIn.
Okay.
And we'll present some ideas. I'll send you some ideas, and then we can narrow the focus, and we can schedule another call if we need to, and we'll go from there.
All right, Leo. It was nice to meet you.
Pleasure meeting you. We'll talk again soon.
Okay, take care.